Welcome to Tigray Television. I'm Mary Neiman. Will be reading the news for you today. Stay tuned. Member of the Tigray Central Command, Getachew Reda, says that Tigray Defense Forces have effectively checked a massive campaign that was meant to capture the capital. In his briefing earlier today, Getachew says in recent fights, Ethiopian forces and allies have taken a lesson that a force is not the way out, saying Tigrayan forces have scored a major victory in Tsalamoi front in northwestern Tigray, where the Ethiopian forces and their allies from Eritrea and Ethiopia have lined up tens of thousands of soldiers. Getachew Reda called recent drone attacks on civilians indiscriminate and said that the aerial attacks on civilians show true nature of the authorities in Addis. Speaking about the possibility of negotiations, Getachew said that the Ethiopian government has not reciprocated to the call by his government for mutually agreed cessation of hostilities. Drone attack on Wednesday has claimed the lives of 10 civilians and wounded several others. Our reporters spoke with victims of the drone attack who were receiving treatments at Ida Referral Hospital, where they witnessed the drone attack taking place on civilians' residential areas. Haile Gabru has more.
Aerial bombardments in densely populated areas have continued to devastate communities all around Tigray. The Tigray's capital Mekelle was hit yet again by a series of 2 airstrikes on Wednesday, 14 September 2022, victimizing the lives of dozens of civilians. Victims of the aerial attacks have expressed their concern and shock as follows.
I am a cameraman from Dumts Oyana Television. The situation is atrocious. It's really barbaric. It's so difficult to describe. The bombardment was targeted on civilians. We were told to go to record the incident. Unfortunately, a bomb was dropped again while we were on duty. I have seen many people fallen with my own eyes. I myself was also fainted out, dropping my camera. It's so shocking.
Right
after having breakfast with my family at home, we were making preparations to go out for work. In that instant, we were bombarded while we were inside our compound. The bomb hit my house and it collapsed. My family members were in different rooms at home. Now, I don't know the whereabouts of my children. Sadly, all the victims are civilians and live upon the fruit of our own labor. I'm terribly sorry about all this.
It was 7:30 in the morning when the drone hit. It is in a residential area right around my home. Then we came out and started to help the victims. After a while, help arrived and they were taken into a hospital. However, 15 minutes later, the drone came around and bombed right in the same spot on a crowd of people gathered to help out.
The bombardments of civilian residential areas and public infrastructures have intensified in Tigray as the genocidal war declared on Tigray by the Ethiopian and Eritrean regimes continues.
Our reporter Sarun Tsagai spoke with other victims of the drone attack in a residential area in Mekelle who say that they're suffering from lack of medication. Doctors at the hospital also said that they're struggling to help the victims as the siege depleted medical supplies. Sarun Tsagai reports.
The Ethiopian government carried out double drone attacks on residential area known as Dagamamsal in the morning of September 14. On top of the year-long siege, the Ethiopian government has continued to target civilians and public infrastructures on daily basis. On yesterday's drone attack, 10 people were killed and more than a dozen others were badly wounded. Among those who died, 5 of them died immediately at the scene, while the other 5 died on their way to Ida Hospital to receive life-saving treatment. Gabramedhin Woldemeret and Gannet Mawratu are among the injured ones. They tell us that they were at their homes when the attack was carried out.
During the first attack, I was in my house. I normally work as a security guard at WFP. So after the first attack, I ran to the office to see if our office was attacked or if anyone was hurt. I got there and saw that the attack wasn't there and I was on my way back home. Then the second round drone attack took place. A piece of sharp nail hit me on the head and I fell.
We were in our house. We heard the sound of a drone and we went out to see what was going on. While we were there, a bomb was dropped. Then people brought us here to the hospital. I was hit on my ribs, thigh, and leg. The injury on my side and thigh is fine, but the one on my leg is pretty bad.
Doctors at the hospital tell us that they're struggling to give proper medical treatment to survivors due to lack of medical equipment. Dr. Kibrom Gabrasillace, medical director at Aider Referral Hospital, tells us that among yesterday's injured victims, 3 were in need of an immediate surgery, but doctors were unable to perform the procedure right away due to lack of oxygen.
A total of 18 victims. Out of these, 3 are in critical condition. They need major surgery. They are waiting for their surgery, but we could do the surgery this morning because we don't have oxygen in the hospital. So they are in a critical condition, still in the emergency room.
أنحنا من ماتريال أبليبلنا ساعات مخنياتو تقنزو لين فوسلو ساعات.
These attacks are happening while we have no medical equipment left in hand. We are here to serve our community. But currently we're running out of glove, anesthetics, or any other necessary materials. It is terribly hard for us. We're struggling here.
Due to the siege-induced lack of medical equipments, such as antibiotic, gloves, pain relievers, we have nothing to help the victims with. It's so sad. We're unable to treat even a simple wound.
The recent frequent airstrikes are devastating the already collapsed health system in Tigray. The health professionals urged for the international community to help prevent unnecessary deaths and to put an end to the misery of the people.
ምንም አይነት ማተሪያል አብሌብልና መጽዩ ተቃንዙ ከክንፍጉሳ አብሌን ኸለሉ
We have no medicine. We can't even give them something to relieve their pain. This is very hard for us. The international community needs to understand our situation and give us an immediate solution.
As the international community should say enough is enough. You know, there is a point to say, a turning point to say enough, and they have to say it now. The whole year we have been under 40 years under siege. The people is starving. We have no basic services. You know, we are expecting airlift for aid. We are not expecting, you know, these attacks, and it is every morning like this, in the face of shortage of medicine, oxygen, fuel, and so on. You know, the unnecessary deaths of civilians is increasing. So the international community should stand on the right side of history and should be vocal for the innocent people of Tigray. We are under attack now, and we are being attacked by 2 governments. So they should intervene, and they should, you know, stop this air attack.
The drone attacks conducted yesterday in a residential neighborhood have devastated many civilians. Aider Referral Hospital, the biggest hospital in Tigray, is overwhelmed by wounded civilians and families of the victims. Our reporter Aragawi Garam Kail has spoken with the chief executive officer at the Aider Comprehensive Specialized Referral Hospital, Dr. Kibrom Gabrasillace, who says the second round attack on the same spot has killed 10 civilians, including first respondents to the initial drone attack.
On Wednesday, Ethiopian government conducted drone attacks that have caused the deaths of 10 civilians and injured 8 others. According to Chief Executive Officer of Aider Comprehensive Referral Hospital, Dr. Kibrom Gabrasillace, 5 of the victims died on the scene, while the other 5 died en route to the hospital.
This morning again, in a neighborhood called Midraganet, there was a drone attack early at around 7:30. So initially 2 individuals were injured. Then there were a rescue team appearing, neighbors as well as healthcare professionals arriving to the scene to help the victims. Then a second attack was targeting them. Then many patients were injured, many individuals were injured, and some of them were dead on the scene. So 5 of these dead bodies were sent to Maqala Hospital, that is another hospital, and the other remaining who were alive were sent to Aider Hospital. From these, 5 of them have died en route to the hospital.
Dr. Kibrom also said that out of the 18 victims, 3 of them were in critical condition and needed surgery. But the hospital is struggling to help them as it is challenged by shortage of medical supplies.
A total of 18 victims. Out of these, 3 are in critical condition. They need major surgery. They are waiting for their surgery, but we could do the surgery this morning because we don't have oxygen in the hospital. So they are in a critical condition still in the emergency room.
He also added that today's attack was conducted twice one after another at residential area in order to kill as many people as possible.
Yeah, to start with, the area is a residential neighborhood. It doesn't have any military installation, camps, or anything that is important militarily. So the attack, the first attack, then the second attack, which targeted this many victims or individuals, civilians living there, and the first responders. Whenever there is an accident everywhere in the world, it is the first responders, Red Cross and city administration first responders who go to the site. So this is a deliberate attack to kill as many people as possible. That's why they succeeded, because their aim is also to kill as many as they can.
Dr. Kubron finally called upon the international community to say enough to the ongoing siege on Tigray and the aerial bombardment that are being carried out on its people.
Yeah, the international community should say enough is enough. You know, there is a point to say, a turning point to say enough, and they have to say it now. The whole year we have been under 40 years under siege. The people is starving. We have no basic services. You know, we are expecting airlift for aid. We are not expecting, you know, these attacks, and it is every morning like this, in the presence, in the face of shortage of medicine, oxygen, fuel, and so on. You know, the unnecessary deaths of civilians is increasing. So the international community should stand on the right side of history and should be vocal for the innocent people of Tigray. We are under attack now, and they are being attacked by two governments. So they should intervene, and they should, stop this air attack.
Our reporters have also spoken with residents of Mekelle that say that these drone attacks that killed 10 civilians and several others have dimmed their hope for the prospect of peace through peace talks that was once expected to bear fruit. Let's take a look.
معنتي سلاماو سب رقيفو سلاماو سب تدوديو توقعوا انيو
درون بمدبداب سلاماوين سبات حدغا بصحلنا ني معناتي
عم نصحات الجبر للو دبداب نصحات بقليلو لحال كله اغاطم بو خابي نيرلو معنتا انا علي حماق نغرينا اينا مصينانا اذا منم عينت ترغم يوبلي
سلامس دلواتنا سلامنا ندل مريت ماتنا يوررنا وتا ماتنا يوسدنا انحنا كن سلامنا ندل قسانتنا ندل
سلازي زتسفازي እንደገና هم بحدش توم صلاتنا اصلمي سمونيو في تግራይ ተስፉ يقرصوا له እሶም ድሮናት ሕዚ ብዙሓት ሰላማውያን ሰባት ወቅዕምና ነው ሕዚ ሰላም ታይል ገበረ ሰላማው ሰብ ወገ ተኾይን ኮበረኻ እዩ
Victims of the deadly drone attack conducted in Mekelle on Wednesday were laid to rest. The drone attack that took place around a residential neighborhood had initially wounded 2 civilians, until a second round of the attack was conducted to kill 10 others. Our reporters attended the funeral of the victims in unauthorized church in Mekelle and spoke with families and loved ones of the victims. Sablok Lamar has more.
On September 14, a drone attack would take place inside a residential neighborhood, initially wounding 2 civilians. However, the drone would strike again in the same area, minutes later, killing 10 civilians and injuring many more. Later that night, the victims of this horrific drone attack would be laid to rest in unauthorized church.
مبزحتو منبر غزا تارجت الجبره بتعمي خبينا درون طقعاتنا جت طقعات يكايد له
These drone and aerial attacks have repeatedly targeted residential areas. As all of you know, today's attack took place in a neighborhood known as Dagmamsal. It hit the same area twice. At first, the residential house was hit and 2 civilians were injured. But the second round looks as if it was intentionally done to kill the first respondents here. It killed and injured many civilians that include children and the elderly. This is so shocking.
አብይ አሕመድ ብተኸታታሊ ኣብ ከተማ መቐለ ኣብ ሰላማውያን ሰባት ኣብ ህፃውንቲ ኣብ ኣረጋውያን
Abiy Ahmed has repeatedly targeted civilians like children and elderly inside their homes in Magala. This attack was inside a residential house. Those that died are civilians.
ሰብ ብድቁስና ሃለወ ብርግጽ ርፍድ ኢሉ እዩ ብድቁስና ሃለወ ክንደይ ግፍ ኣብፂሑ መንእሰይ ዘሎ ዓበይቲ ዘሎ ከምዚ ሕዛብ ዝቐበዝኒና ይውን
The attack took place while people were asleep. Many promising young and old people have been killed. The government's main characteristics is annihilating the people of Tigray.
The attendees of the funeral also told us that the last hope they've had for peace is shattered by these attacks that have killed and wounded their loved ones.
መንግስቲ ትግራይ ብተደጋጋሚ ሰላማዊ ጻውዒት ይልገብር ኣሎ ካብ ተኩስ ልግነ ነገር የለይ ካብ ጦርነት ልግነ ነገር የለይ
The government of Tigray has repeatedly called out for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. There is nothing to gain from violence and war. Everything can be resolved peacefully through negotiation and peace talk. But the Ethiopian government kept on sending drones and jets instead.
This is very clear that the attack was done intentionally to hurt and annihilate the people of Tigray.
አረማናዊ ሆነ ጭፍጨፋ በኔርና ሁላትና በሃይማኖት ደረጃውን ሰላምና ነሰብክ
This is a diabolical act. As religious leaders, we preach and pray for peace. This is a dreadful act.
It is to be recalled that on August 26, an aerial attack took place in a children's playground around a residential area in Magala that killed 7 civilians, including 2 children. These attacks would leave civilians in Tigray terrified as they have constantly targeted civilian residential neighborhoods.
Tigray religious leaders condemned drone attacks in Ma'ala. The religious leaders say they were sad to hear the news of death of civilians while expecting the end of conflict through negotiation process. The religious leaders called upon the international community to take meaningful action going beyond statements of concerns. Let's take a look at their messages.
Tigray is being bombarded every day and night. The infrastructure left of the war is getting destroyed. We are in a time when children go to school wearing uniform, come back being corpse wrapped with garment. We've lost a lot of children. People killed by second round of attack while helping other victims. Funerals are underway in all churches in the town. So the international community should give attention to the crisis in Tigray and do what it takes to resolve the conflict peacefully. It is sad. This happened after the government of Tigray expresses its readiness to resolve the conflict peacefully. My take on this incident is that it is being carried out to impede the ongoing peace efforts. I am also saddened by the international community's indifference to the aerial attacks on civilians and civilian properties.
And we are hoping to hear good news, ceasefire and peace. Yet, the first day, drones struck television station of Dimts Wayane, one of our voice. Then again, second strike on the university. Meghalaya University is under federal government, Ministry of Education. There they wounded guards who haven't been paid for over a year their salary. Again the following day, early in the morning, they strike a civilian family house. A house I know it very well. For the faithful, I know them, from the father to the youngest child. Then people around, they came to support, to help, including mass media people and the medical team. Among those who were killed and wounded are those people.
European Union condemns drone strikes in Tigray. In a statement yesterday, the union said that the drone attacks in Tigray endangered the very fragile hope for peace. The statement said the blockade on humanitarian aid since the eruption of hostilities adds to the already serious and costly suffering on civilians' lives. The union said peace is the only way out, while stating Eritrea as continued impediment to the ongoing efforts towards peace in Ethiopia. The union reiterates that it supports an AU-led process with its readiness to actively engage in it, with coordination with international partners. Tigray Health Professionals Association issued a statement to condemn the continuous aerial attacks in Tigray. The association said more than half of the fatalities of the drone attack on Wednesday were caused by lack of medication. The statement blamed the international community for inaction in light of the ongoing siege on Tigray and the non-stop aerial attacks that is said are being carried out on targeting civilians. Tigray Health Professionals Association called upon the international community to go beyond statements of concerns and declare no-fly zone in Tigray, as well as to ensure unfettered entry of medical supplies into the region. September 15th marks the International Day of Democracy, a day to celebrate and appreciate a democratic society in which election is a big part. The 2020 Tigray election would be a controversial event in Ethiopia, as the federal government had planned to delay nationwide elections for up to a year due to the coronavirus pandemic. Our reporter Sara Kalali takes us back to events leading up to the election. Let's take a look.
Today marks the International Day of Democracy, a day commemorated to appreciate the values and practices of democracy in which election is a big part. The 17-year-long TPLF-led armed struggle, which led to the downfall of the dictatorial Derg regime, had paved the way for a democratic practice in the country. As a result, the people of Tigray as well as Ethiopia for years have been enjoying their democratic rights. Following the rise of Abiy Ahmed to power on April of 2018, with his lofty promises to democratize the nation, democracy was supposed to blossom in a constructive progress and limitations were bound to be corrected. However, the once applauded Abiy Ahmed shortly after was proved to have been hidden behind his false images, refusing to uphold the constitutional national election, claiming it would be impossible to hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Tigray Electoral Commission Commissioner Muluwar Kidanamaram says it was a pretext for delaying elections.
The coronavirus pandemic was real then and it's still real. And this was one of the reasons given for the postponement. But there was any knowledge also as to how this coronavirus could be mitigated in the next years and that election will be conducted. So they want to postpone this from the federal part, that is the present government, but Tigray also wanted to conduct, in spite of the fact that the coronavirus was a threat to everybody.
2 years ago this month, on September 9, 2020, Tigray held its 6th round of regional election contested by 5 parties and 3 independent candidates. The election was highly criticized by the Ethiopian government at the time, whose plan was to delay nationwide elections for up to a year, thereby making Abiy Ahmed's government stay in power unconstitutionally. Ahead of the elections in Tigray, Abiy Ahmed would go on national television hinting at the possibility of a military intervention to any elections not overseen by the National Electoral Board.
ፖለቲከኞች ስልጣን እንዲይዙ ወጣቶች ማለቅ፣ እናቶች ማልቀስ፣ ቤቶች መፍረስ፣ ህዝቦች መፈናቀል የለባቸው።
As a result of the National Electoral Board's refusal to facilitate regional elections in Tigray, Commissioner Muluwar says regional councils of Tigray felt it was necessary to set up the commission to facilitate the election, adding that the people of Tigray cannot be deprived of their rights to self-governance simply due to the National Electoral Board's refusal to facilitate the election.
The Tigray government asked the National Electoral Board to oversee the elections that were to be conducted in Tigray, because according to the constitution it was the sole responsible agency. But the National Electoral Board sided with the decisions of the federal government or the Prime Minister himself and said that they were not to oversee the election. So Tigray was to conduct an election, but the National Electoral Board was not to facilitate this. So the election rights of the people of Tigray cannot be simply hijacked by the National Electoral Board. Its function is only to facilitate and to see if elections have been going smoothly, rightly, and justly in general, transparently. So for these reasons, after its rejection, then the Regional Council conferred and then made a proclamation to establish the Tigray Electoral Commission.
Commissioner Muller said that it was of pivotal importance to hold elections at that particular time in accordance to the constitution because the people of Tigray did not want to be led by a government that was not elected by its people.
So Tigray wanted to conduct its election at that specific time in accordance with the constitution of the country. And the constitution of the country was approved as a result of the 17 years struggle, armed struggle in Tigray, and many people have died for it, and that the Tigray people have had an interest to respect the constitution. So they do want to postpone, and they do want to have a government that is not elected, which simply prolongs its own authority over the public.
Although Abiy Ahmed would later rule out any possibility of a federal military intervention in his interview with ABC, calling it a village gathering that should not bother the federal government. However, not long after, war would be declared on Tigray under the disguised agenda of a law enforcement operation.
ግን ይሄን እንደ ምርጫ ማየትን ትክክል አይደለም። ምርጫ አይደለም። ምርጫ የሚሆነው የምርጫ ቦርድ ሲመራው ብቻ ነው። ይሄ ልክ እንደ ጉባኤ ልክ እንደ እድል ስብስብ አድርገው መውሰድ ነው። አሁን በዚህ መሃል የሚደረጉ የዕቁብ ወይም የእድል ስብስቦች ወይም ጉባኤዎች የኛ ቢገር ሄዴክ መሆን የለባቸው። ሄዴክ አይደለም። በእኔ በኩል ለኢትዮጵያ ውጊያ ያስፈልጋል ብዬ አላምንም። እኔ በፍጹም ውጊያ ከሚደግፉ ጎኖች ሰዎች መመደብ አልፈልግም።
Keeping quiet in during this time would have led to the dismantling of the Tigray government, saying that it was not constitutional beyond the limits of its period in general. So for these reasons, Tigray opted for conducting the election. But for me, this should not have led to a total war, as we have seen it later. It was about election, and the election was to affect Tigray only. And had there been wise politicians in the country, that it wouldn't have been necessary to begin with also. That why do people go to war? Where because of election. That will you be punished because you elect your own leaders? Therefore you should have been rewarded, as far as I know.
In a world of democracy, where most nations represent rights through ballots rather than bullets, the people of Tigray remain under the harshest of conditions never seen in the 21st century. The people continue to be denied of their democratic rights as well as human rights. They have been besieged without any critical services such as banking, telecommunication, electricity, transportation, and the like, while most of the world stands aside and looks.
Well, that concludes our news for the hour. Thank you for tuning in.